Weak Affinity Chromatography, or WAC, uses silica particles as support material for production of WAC columns. First, the silica material is derivatized to shield the polar surface of the silica and to add groups on the surface that enable protein immobilization. These particles are then packed into standard HPLC columns in stainless steel. The target protein is here depicted with an active binding site and lysine residues present on the protein surface that are used for protein coupling. Protein immobilization is performed at neutral pH into the pores of the silica particles. Traditional affinity chromatography is used to purify analytes with high binding affinity to an immobilized protein or other ligand. As compounds are applied to the column, high affinity binders will stay on the column bound to the immobilized protein, while other compounds are eluted. High affinity binders thus too elute from the column, but it takes a very long time, and the sample becomes very diluted. The result will be a very broad peak, eluting very late, which will be impossible to detect. As a consequence, a separate elution step is used, where the mobile phase is changed to, for instance, another pH, in which the binding between the high affinity binder and the immobilized protein is weakened, leading to much faster elution of the high affinity binder. Weak affinity chromatography is used to measure affinities of compounds or fragments that bind weakly or transiently to an immobilized target protein. This is achieved by isocratic elution, meaning the same mobile phase is used throughout the entire screening with no change in pH. Mass spectrometry detection is used, which enables screening of several different compounds or fragments at the same time, as each compound is detected by its mass ion. Ammonium acetate buffer with a near physiological pH is used as mobile phase, which prevents contamination of the mass spectrometer. Only very low sample concentrations are required. Typically, sample concentrations of 0.1 millimolar are used. During screening, compounds with no binding to the column passes through the column with DMSO in the void, and compounds with binding affinity to the target are retarded based on their affinity. However, compounds may also interact with other parts of the column than the immobilized protein. Therefore, a reference column is required to assess specific binding. Here there are a few different options. A blank column packed with the same silica particles but with no immobilized target protein can be used as reference column. Analysis of a compound on both of these columns will give the specific retention time from interactions with the immobilized target protein. However, analytes may also bind with affinity to other parts of the protein than the binding site of interest. So one can also use a column with immobilized target protein where the active binding site of interest has been blocked. The active site can be blocked either by a covalent binder or a high affinity binder present in the mobile phase. Screening on the active protein column and this reference column will result in the specific retention time due to interactions with the active binding site of interest. From the specific retention time, the KD of the compound can be determined directly using a simple formula. KD equals to the number of binding sites present on the column or the amount of active protein immobilized on the column, divided by the specific retention time and the flow rate. This means there is no need for screening of each sample at many different sample concentrations to generate the binding isotherm in order to calculate the KD. Instead, each sample is screened at one very low concentration. Low concentrations are beneficial when working with poorly soluble compounds and also ensure non-competitive binding to the immobilized protein. Under these conditions, this formula will apply, and the KD can be assessed directly from the specific retention time.